Hey everyone, I'm your author June. Before we get started, I really would appreciate it if everyone could hit the subscribe button. It helps me grow the channel, and I would love for all of you to come on this journey with me, as a family. Now, let's get into the story. Let me know if you enjoy. The sun hammered Matt Calder's back, each pulse a fiery brand searing sweat from his forehead into the grime that plastered him. He nudged Jericho, his roan, onward. The animal's breathing rasped like a broken bellows. Before them, the landscape stretched, a vista of withered grass and stunted trees shimmering under the brutal glare. A glance back revealed nothing but a vacant horizon, offering scant solace. They were coming, he was sure of it. An invisible weight crushing his spirit. The law, or something resembling it. The distinction was irrelevant now. Weeks he'd fled, ever since that card game turned volatile, since accusations, thick as cigar haze, had filled that saloon. He was innocent of murder, but a bloodthirsty mob and an ambitious sheriff were a formidable foe. He'd gambled on the wilderness to consume him, to shelter him in its harsh embrace. The air hung stagnant, rich with the reek of baked earth and Jericho's metallic sweat. Matt squinted, eyes gritty, trying to penetrate the wavering heat. He craved water. Jericho needed respite. But survival forfeited such comforts. Not yet. Miles away, nestled in a swale, Rose Fletcher cast an appraising eye over her domain. The sun, a pitiless overlord, demanded tribute from the soil, but Rose remained a tenacious holdout. She moved among the corn stalks, her weathered fingers examining the brittle husks, her expression resolute. The drought had been merciless, draining the land's vitality, yet she countered with every precious drop siphoned from the well, every hour endured beneath the relentless sun. Her father had bequeathed her his knowledge of farming, of the land, of enduring hardship. A severe man, etched and worn like the fieldstones, he'd also been a just one. Since his passing, the farm whispered with silence, an emptiness she couldn't shake. Just her, the clucking hens, and the endless, mute Rose. She longed for his gravelly voice, his rough hand on her shoulder, the steady presence he represented in a world often cruel. She stopped, her gaze snagged by a distant plume of dust ascending on the horizon. A rider, uncommon in these parts. Most people avoided her land, respecting her solitude, or perhaps fearing its implications. She straightened, her hand instinctively drifting to the rifle propped against the fence. Prudence was a lesson etched deep, an essential armor in a world where generosity was a rare find. Jericho stumbled, his legs buckling, his breath a labored rasp. Matt swore softly, easing back on the reins, attempting to alleviate the pressure. "Steady, old boy," he croaked. Almost there. But Jericho was spent. With a final, shuddering exhalation, the horse collapsed, throwing Matt headlong into the dirt. He lay momentarily stunned, the air driven from his lungs. Pushing himself up, his muscles protested with fiery intensity. Jericho remained inert, his chest heaving spasmodically, his eyes vacant and clouded. Matt knelt beside him, stroking the horse's mane. "Damn it all, Jericho," he lamented. He surveyed the surroundings, dread tightening his chest. He was exposed, vulnerable, and a cold certainty settled upon him. Pursuit was imminent. He had to locate sanctuary. He needed hydration. He must press on. Rose watched the rider fall, her grip firming on the rifle. Something in the awkward tumble, the horse's total collapse, suggested desperation, not aggression. Still, caution held sway, her eyes narrowed, her senses heightened. She observed him rise, kneel beside the fallen animal. She registered the bone-deep fatigue evident in his posture, the hopelessness etched into his features. She hesitated. Concealment in the shadows of her home offered security, letting him face his plight alone. That was the sensible path, the guarded one. Yet something restrained her. A flicker of empathy, a long-dormant ember of compassion. She understood the weight of isolation, the sting of vulnerability. She hoisted the rifle over her shoulder and began to walk. Matt knew he couldn't linger with Jericho. Heartbreak tore at him, but choice was absent. A final caress, a silent farewell, and he turned, shuffling towards the distant valley, towards the faint suggestion of a structure shimmering in the heat. Hope, tentative and frail, sparked within him. He hadn't traveled far when he spotted her. A woman, positioned in the center of the field, rifle resting on her shoulder, her gaze unwavering. He froze, his pulse hammering, his hand automatically reaching for the empty leather at his hip. Slowly, he raised his hands, palms facing outward, an offering of peace. "I mean no trouble," he rasped, his throat parched. "My horse is done. I just need water." Rose halted a few feet away, her eyes raking him from head to toe. She noted the dust-caked clothing, the haunted lines around his eyes, the weariness ingrained on his face. She observed the absent holster, a silent testament to a life lived on the fringes. "Who are you?" she queried, her tone measured and guarded. "Name's Matt," he responded. "Matt Calder." He paused, then added, "Just passing through." Rose found his claim implausible. Nobody merely drifted through this desolate region. But she perceived a spark in his eyes, something mirroring her own solitude, her own quiet despair. "There's water at the house," she conceded, her voice softening slightly. "And a barn where your horse can rest, if he can make it that far." Relief washed over Matt, loosening his tense muscles. He struggled to believe his luck. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick with gratitude. "I appreciate it." Rose pivoted and headed towards the house, the rifle a constant presence on her shoulder. Matt followed, his steps faltering and weary, his gaze fixed on her retreating form. He knew he embraced risk, placing faith in a stranger. But options had dwindled. And something about this woman, the way she held herself, suggested a different breed, that she was worthy of trust, or at least worthy of an attempt. He knew trust was fragile, easily shattered, especially for a man in his position. But currently, it was all he possessed. A stranger's plea, the sun hammered Matt's back, each ray a physical blow. He topped the final ridge, the meager sanctuary of Rose Fletcher's farm wavering in the sweltering air. A plume of smoke ascended from the chimney, its signal ambiguous refuge or red flag he couldn't discern. He willed his aching limbs forward, each stride a reluctant concession. Around the cabin, fields lay desolate, the cracked earth yearning for rain, a landscape more akin to a burial ground. He halted at the yard's perimeter, his elongated shadow reaching like a supplicant towards the dwelling. He swallowed against the dryness. "Hello?" he croaked, his voice strained. Silence answered, weighty and profound, punctuated only by the droning chorus of insects. He tried again, raising his voice. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The door groaned open, revealing a woman silhouetted against the cabin's dusky interior, Rose Fletcher. Arms crossed, her expression remained a cipher. Her eyes, the color of a brewing storm, raked over him, registering his dust-caked attire, his exhausted stance, the naked desperation etched into his features. "What do you want?" Her voice, a low, guarded rasp, resembled the whisper of brittle leaves. Matt struggled for articulation. My horse collapsed," he rasped, his voice cracking. "I'm in need of water. And perhaps a place to rest." Rose remained unmoved, a sentinel on her porch. "You have the look of trouble about you." "Trouble's been a shadow at my heels," Matt conceded, his gaze steady. "I'm not courting it." "That's what they all say." Rose remained skeptical. The wind stirred, a whirlwind of dust devils dancing around them. A hawk wheeled above, its cry a piercing lament. Matt raked a hand through his filthy hair, the need for careful wording paramount. "I wouldn't impose, ma'am, were I not near my limit. Only water, a few hours' reprieve. I'll be gone before the sunrise paints the sky." A blatant falsehood. He required more than respite. He needed deliverance. Rose scrutinized him, her gaze unwavering. He felt weighed, judged against an invisible standard. He attempted to project sincerity, yet the sheer weight of his deception threatened to buckle him. "Why should I offer aid?" she questioned, her tone devoid of warmth. "This isn't an almshouse." Because, Matt countered, locking eyes with her. "I suspect you understand the taste of solitude." A flicker of fleeting recognition momentarily softened Rose's expression before vanishing. Completely. He had touched a raw nerve. "I'm a stranger to you," she stated, her voice marginally softer, yet still guarded. "I know nothing of your story." "Some histories are best left buried," Matt offered, his voice hushed. Silence descended, broken only by the rhythmic creak of the porch swing in the wind. Finally, she exhaled, a sigh akin to the wind rustling through sere grass. "Water's drawn at the well," she conceded, gesturing towards the weathered structure adjacent to the barn. "The barn provides shelter, but don't mistake kindness for trust. I'll be watching." Relief flooded Matt, so intense it almost brought him to his knees. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "You won't find cause to regret it." Rose offered no response, simply retreating inside, the door clicking softly shut behind her. Matt shuffled towards the well, his body a symphony of aches, each muscle a screaming protest. He lowered the bucket, the chain protesting against the stone. The water, cool and pure, provided instant solace to his parched throat. As he drank, he surreptitiously glanced toward the cabin. Rose observed him from the window, her face a pale disk in the dim light. He submerged the bucket again, filled it, and trudged toward the barn. The barn offered a cool, shadowy reprieve, redolent with the aroma of hay and dust. Discovering a pile of straw in the corner, he collapsed onto it, succumbing to the pull of exhaustion. He knew he should remain vigilant, yet he could no longer resist. His eyes drifted shut, and he plunged into a restless slumber, besieged by shadows and whispered anxieties. He awoke to the strident call of a rooster. Sunlight pierced through the gaps in the barn walls, illuminating swirling particles of dust. He pushed himself up, his body stiff and throbbing. Although he had slept deeply, the rest had done little to alleviate the pervasive tension. He ventured outside, squinting against the glare. Rose stood by the well retrieving water, ignoring him completely. "Morning," Matt offered, his voice raspy. Rose continued her task, her movements precise and economical. "Coffee's on the stove," she relented, finally, without meeting his gaze. "And biscuits." Matt hesitated. "Thank you," he repeated. He approached the cabin, his senses heightened. He pushed the door inward and stepped inside. The cabin was small but neat, sparsely decorated. The air carried the scent of wood smoke and coffee. A pot simmered, and a plate of biscuits sat on the table. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the strong, bitter liquid warming him from within. He selected a biscuit and consumed it slowly, savoring its simple flavor. Rose entered, her face still an enigma. She poured herself a cup of coffee and took a seat at the table, facing him. "You mentioned trouble dogging you," she said, her voice low. "What form does that trouble take?" Matt hesitated, knowing he could not reveal the truth. "Not yet. The kind that clings to a man," he replied, vaguely. Rose fixed him with an unwavering stare. "That's no answer." "It's all you'll receive," Matt countered, his gaze locked with hers. "For now." Rose didn't press further, instead sipping her coffee, her eyes narrowed. "You'll have to leave," she declared, finally. "I can't afford entanglement in whatever you're fleeing." "I understand," Matt replied, his voice subdued. "I'll depart as soon as feasible, but I require a little more time." "How much?" Rose pressed, her tone sharp. Matt hesitated. "A week," he stated, at last. "Just 1 week." Rose scrutinized him, her expression hardening. "A week is an eternity," she said. "Much can transpire in 7 days." "I'm aware," Matt answered. "But I assure you, I'll bring no harm. And I'll compensate you for the inconvenience. I have savings concealed." Rose remained silent, her gaze penetrating. She regarded him intently, seeing beyond the grime and exhaustion, perceiving something deeper, concealed beneath the surface. "Very well," she conceded, her voice barely audible. "A week, but that's the limit, and should the law come calling, I will disclose everything." Matt nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You won't be disappointed." Rose offered no reply, simply rising and exiting, leaving Matt alone in the cabin with his coffee, his biscuits, and his secrets. He recognized that he had bought himself time, but that time was rapidly dwindling. He had a week to clear his name, to outrun his past, to persuade Rose Fletcher that he wasn't the villain everyone perceived him to be. A week to demonstrate his worthiness of her trust, worthy of a second chance. A week to find a haven in her heart. Storms embrace the initial thunderclap against the cabin glass jolted Matt, a sharp exclamation point to the already tense afternoon. He recoiled on the cot Rose had grudgingly offered. Plain storms were familiar, yet this felt different, thick with a menace that echoed the unrest gnawing at him. Rose, attending a simmering pot without a word, cast him a look, her face a cipher. The wind escalated, keening like a distressed spirit around the building's edges, and rain became a furious assault against the timbered walls. "Seems you're stranded," she announced, her voice struggling against the escalating tempest. The statement held no warmth, merely a decree of unavoidable circumstances. Matt rose, raking fingers through his already unruly hair. "I thought I could reach." "A futile venture," Rose cut in, her eyes like sharpened flint. "The creek will be a raging torrent within the hour." "You won't get a mile." She returned to the stove, economical in her movements. "Besides," she tossed over her shoulder, almost casually, "finding your corpse downstream wouldn't be good for business." Matt caught a glimpse of something not quite pity, perhaps a distant cousin in her gaze. He knew his presence was a burden, a disturbance in her solitary existence, but desperation clung to him. "Then, I appreciate your aid, Miss Fletcher." "Rose," she corrected, not turning. And don't confuse this with charity. It's simply self-preservation. Nightfall brought an intensification of the storm. Brief, violent flashes of lightning revealed the taut lines of worry etched onto their faces. The air itself seemed charged, a physical manifestation of the unspoken anxieties inhabiting the confined space. Rose ladled a hearty stew into 2 bowls, sliding one toward Matt with a curt nod. The aroma of beans and root vegetables offered unexpected comfort, a small spark of normalcy amidst the raging elements. They ate in quiet, punctuated only by the downpour and the periodic roar of thunder. Matt devoured his portion, finding warmth blooming within him. He hadn't realized the extent of his hunger. Rose, conversely, ate with measured slowness, her eyes occasionally lifting to study him with an unsettling intensity. Her gaze felt like a tangible weight, assessing, judging. "So," she said finally, breaking the oppressive quiet. "Matt Calder, is it? Your given name?" He hesitated, his grip on the spoon tightening. "It is. And what blows a man named Matt Calder onto my land, looking like he's fleeing the devil himself?" He met her stare, his own veiled. "Just passing through." Rose emitted a short, humorless sound. "Passing through? With a fallen horse? And a story plastered on your face that could sour cream?" "I doubt that." She leaned back, arms crossed. "I'm not naive, Mr. Calder. I recognize trouble when it walks through the door. And you, sir, are trouble wearing boots." "I'm not seeking conflict," he countered, his voice a low plea. "I only need some time." "Time for what?" she pressed. "To bleed me dry? Draw lawmen to my doorstep? What exactly are you running from?" He remained mute, jaw clenched. He couldn't confide in her. Not yet. Sharing his burden would only endanger her. Rose sighed, her shoulders deflating slightly. "Fine. Keep your secrets close. But know this, Mr. Calder, I'm keeping a close eye on you. One wrong step, and you're gone. Clear?" "Crystal," he responded, meeting her unwavering gaze. After the meal, Rose cleared the remnants, swift and efficient. She then retrieved a rifle from its place behind the stove, working the lever with practiced ease. "Where should I rest?" Matt asked, nodding toward the cot. "That's yours," she stated, her attention fixed on the firearm. "I'll take the chair." "That's unnecessary," he argued. "I can sleep on the floor." "I wouldn't close my eyes with you at my back," she said, her tone devoid of inflection. "Consider it a precaution." She settled into the chair, the rifle balanced on her lap, her gaze directed at the entrance. Matt watched her, his thoughts spiraling. He knew he was imposing, placing her in harm's way, yet he had nowhere else to turn. He settled onto the cot, the coarse blanket irritating his skin. The storm still unleashed its fury, a symphony of wind, rain, and crashing thunder. He closed his eyes, but sleep remained elusive. He was too strung out, too acutely aware of Rose's presence, of the danger lurking just beyond the cabin walls. He looked at her, her face highlighted by the flickering lamplight. Fatigue etched deep lines, her features careworn. Yet her eyes remained alert, watchful. He detected a core strength, a tenacity that defied her isolated existence. He wondered at the experiences that had driven her to this remote corner of the world, the secrets concealed beneath her wary demeanor. As the hours ticked by, the storm gradually lost its intensity. The wind lessened, the rain dwindled to a drizzle, and the thunder diminished to a distant rumble. Matt finally succumbed to sleep, his dreams filled with swirling shadows and hushed whispers. When he awoke, dawn painted the cabin in pale hues. Rose remained in the chair, the rifle still resting across her lap, her eyes still open. She regarded him, her expression unreadable as ever. "The storm's broken," she said. "You're free to leave." Matt sat up, his muscles protesting. He was aware he should depart, that his continued presence endangered her, but something held him back, rooted to the spot. He looked at Rose, at the fatigue shadowing her eyes, at the quiet power that radiated from her. He perceived a glimmer of something else there too, a suggestion of a loneliness that mirrored his own. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere, "for everything." Rose simply nodded, her gaze shifting away. She offered no farewell. Stepping out into the nascent light, Matt knew he was leaving a part of himself behind. He had no idea what awaited him, but he knew beyond doubt that he would never forget Rose Fletcher. Whispers of the past, the fire crackled, a meager defense against the damp chill that lingered even within the stone walls of Rose's cabin. Matt sat hunched forward, the offered blanket pulled tight around his shoulders. He'd managed a few swallows of water, enough to ease the rawness in his throat, but the exhaustion clung to him like a shroud. Rose watched him from across the room, her gaze unwavering, assessing. He knew he couldn't delay it any longer. She deserved an explanation, or at least a version of one. He cleared his throat. "My name is Matt Calder," he began, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. He hadn't spoken them aloud in days, not since everything had fallen apart. "I was working cattle, down south, Blackwood Ranch." Rose's brow furrowed, a subtle movement, but Matt caught it. He pressed on. "Things got complicated. A disagreement with the foreman. It wasn't my fault, but He let the sentence trail off, allowing her to fill in the blanks, careful not to actually lie. He omitted the gambling debt, the bar fight, the man lying dead in the dirt with Matt standing over him, a smoking gun in his hand. All of that was buried deep, a poisoned well he dared not draw from. "A disagreement?" Rose echoed, her voice flat. "That led you to abandon your horse in a storm and seek refuge with a stranger." He met her gaze, forcing himself to hold it. "It was more than a disagreement. I needed to get away, fast." He offered a wry, self-deprecating smile, hoping it would soften the edges of his confession. "Let's just say I ruffled some feathers, powerful feathers." He purposefully kept the details vague, hoping to avoid her suspicion. Rose remained unconvinced. She rose and moved closer to the fire, poking at the logs with a metal rod. The fire flared, casting dancing shadows on her face, highlighting the sharp angles of her cheekbones and the skepticism etched around her eyes. "And what kind of work did you do at this Blackwood Ranch?" "Cowboy work," Matt replied, injecting a hint of pride into his voice. "Breaking horses, driving cattle, mending fences, the usual." He subconsciously rubbed his wrist, the one bearing the brand. He'd almost forgotten it in his exhaustion. A brand that marked him as belonging to Blackwood. A brand that could be his undoing. Rose's eyes followed the motion. She knelt beside him, closer than she had been before. The air crackled with a strange tension. "Show me," she commanded, her voice low. Matt hesitated. He could refuse, but that would only confirm her suspicions. Slowly, he pushed back the sleeve of the blanket, revealing the faded, but still discernible, Blackwood Ranch brand seared into his skin. A stylized B within a circle. Rose examined it closely. her fingers brushing against the scar tissue. Her touch was light, almost hesitant, yet it sent a jolt through him, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "Blackwood," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "They're known for their thoroughness." He swallowed hard. "It's just a job, Rose. It doesn't define me." A lie, he knew. It defined him more than he cared to admit. It was a mark of belonging, of a life he had known, however flawed. She stood up, her gaze once again distant, unreadable. "Everything defines us, Mr. Calder. Every choice, every action, every mark we bear." She walked back to her side of the room, the distance between them widening again, not just physically, but emotionally. "Why did you take me in?" Matt asked, the question hanging in the air. "You don't trust me. I can see it in your eyes." Rose turned, her expression softening slightly. "My father always said, never turn away a man in need, especially during a storm. But that doesn't mean I have to be a fool." She paused, her gaze piercing. "I'm giving you shelter, Mr. Calder. Nothing more. Come morning, you'll be on your way." He knew he should argue, plead his case, try to convince her of his innocence, or at least his harmlessness. But he was too tired, too defeated, and a part of him, a cynical, weary part, wondered if he even deserved her trust. He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He pulled the blanket tighter around him, turning away from her, seeking solace in the flickering flames. But the warmth of the fire couldn't penetrate the chill that had settled in his bones, the chill of isolation, of guilt, of the knowledge that he was a hunted man, even here, in this remote haven. Rose watched him, a battle raging within her. Her instincts screamed at her to send him away, to protect herself and her home from whatever darkness he carried with him. But something else, a flicker of compassion, a whisper of hope, urged her to look deeper, to see beyond the brand, beyond the carefully constructed lies, to the man beneath. She thought of her father, his unwavering belief in the goodness of people, even those who seemed lost or broken. She remembered his words. "Everyone deserves a chance, Rose, even the ones who don't seem to deserve it." But could she trust her father's wisdom in this case? Could she risk her own safety, her own peace of mind, on a man who was clearly running from something terrible? She looked at Matt again, his face etched with weariness, his body slumped with exhaustion. He looked like a man haunted by his past, a man desperate for a second chance. And in that moment, Rose made a decision. She wouldn't turn him out into the storm, not yet. She would give him a night's rest, a warm meal, a chance to explain himself. But she would also be vigilant, watchful, ready to defend herself if necessary. She banked the fire, ensuring it would last through the night. Then she lay down on her cot, fully clothed, her hand resting on the rifle she kept hidden beneath her blanket. She closed her eyes, but sleep eluded her. The whispers of the past, both his and hers, filled the small cabin, mingling with the crackling of the fire and the howling of the wind outside. She could only hope that morning would bring clarity, not more danger. Shadow of the law, a plume of ochre dust, heralded Sheriff Thompson's arrival, a gritty fanfare announcing authority as it surged down Main Street. Townsfolk, with the ingrained instinct of startled prey, scattered to the verges. Astride his obsidian gelding, Justice, Thompson presented an unyielding figure. His eyes, like chips of flint, surveyed the weathered facades, the parched earth, the guarded faces peering from dim windows. His visage, a testament to hard-won wisdom etched by sun and time, spoke of unbending resolve. Flanking him, his deputies, younger and more impulsive, kept hands poised near their sidearms. The general store naturally drew the eye, its porch offering a sliver of respite and a haven for whispered rumors. Thompson dismounted with a practiced grace that defied his age, the saddle leather groaning a somber melody. He secured Justice to the rail, the horse exhaling a dusty breath, and ascended to the porch, his spurs clicking a subdued, yet potent warning against the aged boards. Afternoon. Thompson's voice resonated, a low timbre weighted with the authority he carried. Just passin' through, askin' some questions. A sinewy man, teeth stained with tobacco, edged forward. Questions, Sheriff? About what? About a fella, Thompson replied, his gaze sharpening. Name of Matt Calder. Wanted for, well, let's just say questioning concerning an incident in Blackwood territory. The name settled like a shroud. A ripple of unease passed through the assembled townsfolk. Rose's name remained unspoken, yet the air thrummed with unspoken implications. Blackwood. The very word conjured images of vast holdings, formidable power, and a casual disregard for legal constraints when inconvenient. Calder, you say? Another man, stroking his beard, inquired, Don't recall anyone by that name round here. Thompson's gaze locked onto the speaker. Perhaps not. But he's out there, carries a Blackwood brand on his left shoulder, distinctive mark. You spot him, you let me. No. Clear? A chorus of murmured affirmations followed. With a curt nod, Thompson turned to his men. Check the saloon. The livery. See if any fresh horses have come through. As they departed, Thompson remained on the porch, his gaze sweeping the horizon. He perceived more than just the endless prairie. He saw the quiet desperation etched on the faces before him, the apprehension flickering in their depths. Years of service had taught him to recognize suppressed truths, to sense when loyalties were being concealed. Back at the farm, Rose experienced a tremor of fear. Engaged in her routine of tending the chickens, their rhythmic clucking a familiar comfort, the sheriff's arrival had cast a long, ominous pall over her modest world. She observed Matt from the periphery. He was splitting wood with frenetic energy, each swing of the axe a manifestation of his bottled-up anxiety. The muscles of his back strained against his worn shirt, the Blackwood brand a raw emblem of the danger he embodied. She approached him, her boots crunching on the parched soil. "Matt?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. "The sheriff's in town." He halted mid-swing, the axe suspended. Turning, his eyes reflected a haunted quality. "Thompson?" Rose confirmed with a nod. "He's asking about you." The axe clattered to the ground. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, smearing dirt across his forehead. "I have to go." "Where will you go?" she asked, a note of involuntary concern lacing her tone. "Anywhere but here," he responded, his gaze fixed on the distant plains. "I won't bring prey." "Trouble to your door, Rose." "It's already here, Matt," she countered softly. "Whether you stay or flee." She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "Tell me, Matt, were you involved?" He recoiled as if struck. "No," he said, his voice raspy with anguish. "I swear to you, Rose, I didn't murder anyone." She scrutinized his face, seeking any hint of deceit. She discerned only weariness, regret, a desperate plea for credibility. Something in his gaze, something indefinable, compelled her belief. "Then stay," she declared, her voice resolute. "We'll confront this together." He regarded her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of astonishment and gratitude. "You don't have to do this, Rose. It isn't your burden." "Perhaps not," she replied, a spark of defiance igniting in her eyes. "But it is now." She turned and walked toward the house, her steps unwavering. As dusk painted the sky in fiery hues that evening, Rose and Matt sat on the porch, the stillness punctuated only by the chirping of insects. Tension hung heavy in the air, the weight of the unknown pressing down upon them. "He'll be back," Matt stated, his voice subdued. "Thompson won't relent. Then we'll be prepared." Rose responded, her hand resting on the rifle beside her. The distant howl of a coyote echoed through the night, a mournful lament seemingly foreshadowing the impending tempest. Rose glanced at Matt, his features etched with worry. She understood the peril was genuine, the stakes monumental. But she also knew she couldn't abandon him now. Something had transformed between them, a bond forged in the crucible of dread and uncertainty. She had extended sanctuary, and in doing so, had unknowingly claimed him. And he, in turn, had claimed a piece of her. Back in town, Sheriff Thompson stood on the porch of the general store, watching the last vestiges of sunlight fade. He had registered the sidelong glances, the muted whispers, the averted gazes. He knew Matt Calder was nearby. He could sense it instinctively. He simply needed to locate him before matters escalated. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust and addressed his deputies. "Saddle up," he said, his voice grim. "We're paying a visit to Rose Fletcher's place." Dust motes pirouetted in the sunbeam that knifed into the kitchen. Rose stood transfixed, the flimsy newsprint trembling in her grasp. Tucked into Matt's seed catalog, the one he'd pored over just yesterday, dreaming of spring, it screamed of the trail. Blackwood ranch hand accused of murder. The grainy image below showed a younger, sterner Matt Calder. Her breath caught. Suddenly, the small kitchen pressed in on her, air thick with unspoken doubts. Suspicions she diligently suppressed, dismissing them as mere prejudice, now surged forth, sharp and insistent. Had his eagerness to help, his ready willingness to work, been nothing more than a charade? A calculated ploy to secure her silence, her cooperation? Footfalls echoed on the porch. The familiar complaint of a floorboard heralded his arrival. He was whistling, a light-hearted melody that rasped against her nerves. He broke off abruptly, his cheerfulness dissolving as he registered her expression. "Rose, what is it?" She presented the clipping, the paper crackling under the force of her grip. "This, Matt. Explain this." He lost all color. His face, suddenly haggard, seemed to shrink around his features. He didn't reach for the damning evidence, didn't attempt denial. "Where did you find that?" His voice was a low, constricted rasp. "It's not the source that matters. It's the accusation." "Accused of murder, Matt. And you kept it hidden." "Allowed me to offer you shelter, to trust you, while concealing this." Her voice escalated, each word barbed with hurt and fury. He moved toward her, hand extended in supplication. "Rose, please, let me explain." She recoiled, bumping against the table's edge. A tin cup teetered, threatening to spill. "Explain? Disprove your guilt? Justify the deception you've spun from the start?" "I didn't deceive you," he countered, his eyes beseeching her. "I simply withheld the whole truth. I feared your reaction." "Feared what? Exposure? Perhaps I should have delivered you to the authorities. Perhaps I still will." The notion, once unthinkable, now solidified into a cold knot into a cold. Her stomach. His hand fell, his shoulders slumped. "I'm not a killer, Rose." I swear I had no part in anyone's death." "Then account for the headline. Why is Sheriff Thompson on your trail?" She folded her arms, striving for composure, though her voice quivered. He raked a hand through his hair, his gaze flitting about the cramped space, seeking a non-existent escape. "It's a tangled affair. It involves the Blackwoods." "The Blackwoods? What connection do they have?" The name resonated through the territory. Wealth, influence, and a reputation for skirting justice. "They set me up," he breathed, barely audible. "They murdered Jed Harper and pinned it on me." "Framed? What motive could they have?" He finally locked eyes with her, his gaze burning with intensity. "Jeddy stumbled upon something they sought to suppress, evidence of illicit dealings, land grabs, unimaginable corruption. He intended to expose them." Rose absorbed this, her skepticism slowly crumbling, replaced by a tenuous hope. "Or simply the yearning to believe." "And you witnessed this evidence?" "No. But Jed confided in me. He trusted me. He planned to reveal it the following day, but he was dead by sunrise." He paused, his voice choked with emotion. "He was discovered in his cabin, a bullet through the heart. And I was found nearby, dead drunk, with a firearm in my hand." "Drunk?" Rose seized on the detail. "You were intoxicated?" "We shared a celebratory drink that evening. But I swear, Rose, I wouldn't have harmed him. He was a friend." "The gun, though?" "Not mine. A Blackwood weapon, planted without a doubt." I awoke with a splitting headache and a dim recollection of staggering back to my bunk. No memory of any gun. Rose scrutinized him, searching for any flicker. Falsehood. She detected fear, undeniably, but also a stark, almost painful veracity. "Why not approach the sheriff?" "The Blackwoods practically own the sheriff's department, Rose. That much is common knowledge. Who do you think guided them to my whereabouts? Who financed the dissemination of that news clipping?" He indicated the paper in her hand. The implications landed heavily. If his story held true, he wasn't simply evading the law, but battling a powerful and unscrupulous force capable of anything to safeguard its interests. "And they might come here?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I can't say for sure," he conceded, "but I can't risk endangering you by remaining." He stepped back, distancing himself. "Where would you go?" The question surprised her as much as him. His destination shouldn't concern her. She should welcome his departure. "Inconsequential. Anywhere they can't track me. Somewhere to clear my name." "And how do you propose to achieve that? Confronting the Blackwoods single-handedly?" He shook his head, defeated. "I haven't figured it out yet, but I can't spend my life running." Rose studied him, truly saw him for the first time. Not a hardened criminal, but a man trapped in desperation, battling for survival. A man who, despite his predicament, had shown her kindness, respect, perhaps even more. "Stay," she murmured, barely audible. He stared, disbelief etched on his features. "Rose, I can't. It's too perilous." "We'll face it together," she insisted, her voice gaining strength. "If you speak the truth, flight offers no solution. They'll pursue you endlessly. We need to expose their lies and prove your innocence." He hesitated, his gaze probing hers. "You would do that? For me?" "I can't explain why," she admitted. "Maybe I perceive something in you unseen by others. Maybe I'm weary of solitude. Or, perhaps," she added, a faint smile touching her lips, Perhaps I simply resent being deceived." A genuine smile illuminated his face, reaching his eyes. "Thank you, Rose. Thank you." The die was cast. They were bound together, for richer, for poorer. Yet, as Rose gazed at Matt, a chilling premonition washed over her. They were pitted against formidable adversaries, and she had no comprehension of the depths of their depravity. The truth had emerged, but the genuine danger had just begun. A leap of faith, the lamplight painted a restless silhouette of Rose on the kitchen floor's uneven boards. She stalked back and forth, the newsprint crumpled in her fist, threatening to disintegrate. "Calder," Matthew suspected in Blackwood Ranch slang, the headline screamed. The harsh lettering seemed to contaminate the air, a blight on the familiar solace of her home. Every groan of the floorboards under her boots amplified the discord within. The wind, a banshee outside, clawed at the window panes, an insistent, spectral rapping. It was an external echo of the tempest brewing within her soul. To trust Mattit bordered on lunacy. Every instinct, honed by years of isolation, shrieked at her to expel him, to safeguard herself. He was an outlaw, branded with a heinous accusation. Sheltering him risked the full weight of justice crashing down on her secluded sanctuary, obliterating the hard-won tranquility she'd carved out since her father's demise. Yet, when she shut her eyes, she didn't envision a ruthless killer. She recalled the delicate etchings of exhaustion framing his eyes, the quiet ferocity he exhibited while tending the chickens, the startling tenderness with which he'd nursed Bess, her ailing mare, back to vitality. She pictured him halting her from splitting wood that initial day, his weathered palms enveloping hers on the axe handle, his voice a soft rumble that defied the gales. "Allow me." "You've borne enough." She ceased her pacing, fixating on the simmering kettle perched atop the stove. The rhythmic sigh of escaping steam sliced through the mental pandemonium. She was certain, deep in her core, that the Blackwood clan wielded a shadowy dominion over these lands, a power capable of distorting reality as readily as they broke the spirits of honest ranchers. Hadn't her father cautioned her, repeatedly, to avoid their machinations? Rose poured a cup of tea, but the comforting aroma of chamomile barely grazed her frayed nerves. She carried the steaming mug to the window, peering out at the impenetrable night. The gale intensified, smearing rain across the glass in thick, opaque streaks. It was a night meant for refuge, for seeking sanctuary. And hadn't Matt sought refuge with her? Her thoughts returned to their conversation after she revealed the clipping. The unveiled truth in his voice when he discussed the Blackwoods, the raw supplication conveyed through his eyes as he affirmed his innocence. No pleading, no groveling, simply a declaration of his reality. Trusting her discernment. A mirthless chuckle escaped her throat. Trust, a rare and invaluable resource, particularly for someone who had only learned to depend on herself. However, something about Matt's narrative, about his very bearing, awakened a dormant part of her, a part craving connection, craving more than mere existence. Setting the tea down with a determined tap, Rose strode towards the back entrance. Donning her heavy oilskin coat, she retrieved a lantern from its hook. The wind assaulted her as she ventured outside, nearly wresting the lamp from her grip. She hoisted it high, its glow carving a path through the rain-drenched darkness towards the barn. Matt was precisely where she anticipated, clearing out a stall, his shoulders slumped against the chill. The lantern splashed his face with dancing shadows, accentuating the severe angles of his jaw and the deep grooves that bracketed his eyes. He lifted his gaze as she neared, his expression inscrutable. "Rose?" His voice was almost swallowed by the wind's lament. She raised the lantern, its beam illuminating the space dividing them. "I saw the news," she stated, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. He offered a slow nod, his stare unwavering. "I imagined you had. You claim they framed you. I was." The silence lingered, breached only by the ululating wind and the nervous shuffle of horses within their enclosures. Rose scrutinized his eyes, seeking any trace of falseness. She uncovered only exhaustion and an unspoken, desperate hope. "Tell me everything," she implored, her tone gentler now. Matt straightened, leaning on the pitchfork. He spoke for what seemed an eternity, recounting the events precipitating the killing, the intricate fabric of lies woven by the Blackwoods, the frantic flight that brought him to her threshold. He didn't excuse his actions, didn't attempt to cast himself as righteous. Simply, he related his truth, as he understood it. When he concluded, Rose remained silent, her stillness amplified by the relentless drumming of rain on the barn roof, which seemed to underscore the heaviness of his confession. At last, she spoke. "I believe you, Matt." The relief that inundated his face was tangible. He closed his eyes momentarily, as though steeling himself against its potency. When he reopened them, his gaze brimmed with a gratitude beyond articulation. "Thank you, Rose," he murmured, his voice raspy. "More than words can express. But belief alone isn't sufficient," she pressed, her tone taking on an edge. "We need to substantiate it." A flicker of resolve ignited within Matt's eyes. "How?" Rose moved closer, her gaze locking onto his. "We retaliate." A ghost of a smile played on Matt's lips. "I like the sound of that." For the first time since his arrival, Rose truly allowed herself to perceive him, not as a looming threat, but as an accomplice. A confederate. Something deeper. Shared vulnerability hung thick in the air, denser than the mingled scents of hay and horseflesh. She beheld not simply a man charged with murder, but a man battling for his existence, for his integrity. And she understood, with a conviction that startled even her, that she would stand by his side. She extended her hand, a slight tremor rippling through it, and placed it on his arm. His muscles tensed beneath her touch, then gradually softened. He glanced down at her hand, then back up at her face, his eyes posing a question she couldn't entirely decipher. "We'll navigate this together," she breathed, her voice barely audible. Matt enveloped her hand with his own, his weathered fingers both warm and firm. "Together," he echoed, his voice a deep resonance. In that instant, standing within the rain-swept barn, enveloped by the sounds of the storm, and the quiet solace of the animals, a connection was cemented, a leap of faith undertaken. Rose Fletcher, the reclusive farmer, had unearthed a cause to fight for, a basis for trust, a reason to believe in something transcending bare survival. And Matt Calder, the fugitive, had discovered a home, a refuge, and perhaps something infinitely more precious, a reason to remain. Journey into darkness. The moon, a sliver in the inky sky, offered little illumination as they slipped away from the farm. Rose led the way, her familiarity with the land their only advantage. Matt, burdened by guilt and the weight of his situation, followed close behind. The rhythmic creak of saddle leather, a constant reminder of their desperate flight. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension that filled the space between them. "Are you sure about this, Rose?" Matt asked, his voice a low murmur barely audible above the rustling leaves. "You're risking everything for a man you barely know." Rose didn't break stride. "I'm not doing it for you, Calder," she said, her voice firm. "I'm doing it because someone has to stand up to the Blackwoods. And because, deep down, I believe you." Matt nodded slowly, gratitude warring with a renewed sense of unease. He knew Rose wasn't one for empty words, and her unwavering resolve both impressed and intimidated him. He wondered what had forged such a steely spirit in a woman living such a solitary life. Their journey took them through dense forests, across Rocky Creek, beds, and over windswept ridges. The landscape, once a comforting backdrop to Rose's quiet existence, now seemed menacing, every shadow a potential hiding place for Blackwood's men. They rode in silence for hours, broken only by the occasional call of a night bird or the snorting of their horses. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky with hues of pink and orange, they reached a narrow canyon, its walls rising hundreds of feet on either side. Rose reined in her horse, her eyes scanning the surrounding cliffs. "We'll rest here," she said, dismounting with a practiced ease. "It's defensible." Matt followed suit, his muscles aching from the long ride. He unsaddled his horse, grateful for the chance to stretch his legs. Rose busied herself gathering firewood, her movements efficient and economical. "We need to talk about what we're going to do," Matt said, his voice serious. "We can't just wander around aimlessly, we need a plan." Rose glanced up from her task, her expression unreadable. "I have a plan," she said. "We're going to find Jedediah Blackwood's ledger. It's hidden somewhere, and it'll prove that he ordered the hit." "And where do we start looking?" Matt asked, skepticism lacing his tone. "At his ranch," Rose replied, her gaze unwavering. "It's the only place that makes sense." Matt stared at her, incredulous. "You want to go to Blackwood's ranch? That's suicide." "Maybe," Rose conceded. "But it's the only way." As they sat by the fire, sharing a meager meal of dried meat and hardtack, Matt couldn't help but admire Rose's courage, even if he questioned her sanity. She was a force of nature, as unyielding and untamed as the land itself. "Tell me about your father," Matt said, breaking the silence. He had noticed a sadness in Rose's eyes when she spoke of him, a lingering grief that hinted at a deeper story. Rose hesitated, her gaze fixed on the flames. "He was a good man," she said finally. "Honest, hard-working. He taught me everything I know." "What happened to him?" Matt pressed gently. Rose sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "He died in an accident," she said. "A tree fell on him while he was clearing land." Matt nodded, sensing that there was more to the story than she was letting on. "I'm sorry," he said. "It was a long time ago," Rose said, her voice flat. "I've learned to live with it." As the day wore on, they rested and planned, their conversation revealing glimpses into their pasts. Matt spoke of his life as a ranch hand, his dreams of owning his own spread, and the events that had led to his current predicament. He told her about the Blackwoods' ruthless ambition and their willingness to stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Rose, in turn, shared her memories of growing up on the farm, her love for the land, and her determination to protect it from those who would exploit it. She spoke of her father's unwavering belief in justice and his commitment to helping those in need. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon walls, a sense of camaraderie began to grow between them. They were two unlikely allies, bound together by circumstance and a shared desire for justice. Suddenly, a twig snapped in the distance, shattering the peaceful silence. Rose and Matt exchanged a look, their hands instinctively reaching for their weapons. "Someone's out there," Matt whispered, his eyes scanning the surrounding terrain. Rose nodded, her expression grim. "Stay close," she said, drawing her rifle. "We're not alone." They moved silently through the canyon, their senses on high alert. The air was thick with anticipation. Every rustle of leaves, every chirp of crickets amplified in the stillness. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, silhouetted against the fading light. It was a man on horseback, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. "Calder!" the man shouted, his voice echoing through the canyon. "We know you're here. Come out with your hands up." Matt and Rose exchanged a desperate glance. They were trapped. "We're not going to surrender," Matt shouted back, his voice ringing with defiance. The man chuckled, a cold, cruel sound that sent a shiver down Matt's spine. "That's your choice, Calder," he said. "But you can't hide forever." The figure spurred his horse forward, and several more riders emerged from the shadows, surrounding them. Matt and Rose stood back to back, their weapons raised, ready to fight. Their journey into darkness had just begun. The prospectors priced the horses plodded along the tight trail, the air thick with the mingled scents of resin and moist soil. Rose's jaw remained tight, eyes glued to the rugged path, a silent barometer of her rising apprehension. Matt kept a watchful distance, his gaze sweeping the timbered slopes, hand hovering near the rifle across his thighs. He admired her resolve, the sheer audacity of risking everything for a near stranger, yet a gnawing unease persisted. He was dragging her into a mire that threatened to consume them both. "How much further?" he rumbled, breaking the silence. Without missing a beat, Rose replied, "Another hour, perhaps. Caleb prefers his solitude, high in these hills." Caleb, the old prospector. Their last, albeit shaky, recourse. Rose claimed he'd witnessed the heated exchange between Jed Blackwood and Finn, the deceased gambler Matt stood accused of killing. His testimony could be Matt's salvation. But she'd stressed Caleb's character. A miserly hermit, infamously difficult. The trail gave way to a sparse, rocky clearing. A decrepit shack clung stubbornly to a granite face, a plume of smoke rising lazily from its chimney. Near it, a sway-backed mule grazed, ribs stark against its patchy hide. This was it. Dismounting, the saddle leather groaned beneath Rose. She tethered her mare to a stunted pine, signaling Matt to do likewise. "Stay alert," she breathed, eyes scanning the perimeter. They approached the shack with caution. Rose rapped sharply on the crude door. The silence that followed felt stretched, brittle. At last, a gravelly voice demanded, "Who is it?" "What's wanted?" "Rose Fletcher, Caleb. I need a word." A prolonged pause. Then, the rasp of bolts sliding back, and the door swung inward, revealing a gaunt, ancient figure, his face a topography of wrinkles carved by sun and adversity. Though age had hazed his eyes, they still held a shrewd gleam. He gripped a rusted shotgun in his twisted hands. "Rose," he croaked, his voice a harsh scrape. "Didn't expect you up here. And who's this you've brought?" His gaze latched onto Matt, suspicion etching deeper lines into his already dour expression. "This is Matt Calder. He requires your assistance." Caleb's eyes narrowed to slits. "Help? Got nothing to spare. Least of all help." He spat a stream of brown juice onto the dirt. "State your business, and quickly. I haven't got all day." Rose inhaled deeply. "It concerns Finn. What you saw that night at the saloon." The old man's features hardened like granite. "That's Blackwood's affair. I don't meddle in Blackwood's affairs." You saw Jed Blackwood threaten Finn, Matt asserted, stepping forward. You heard him vow to kill him. Caleb shuffled uneasily, his gaze flitting between Matt, Rose, and back again. Saw nothing, heard nothing. Now, get off my property. He began to shut the door. Caleb, please, Rose implored, her voice tight with desperation. Matt's innocent. They'll hang him for something he didn't commit. Guilty or not, none of my concern, Caleb countered, his tone devoid of warmth. I got my own hide to worry about. Matt knew they were losing ground. He had to press. What if it were your life, old man? Wouldn't you crave someone to speak for you? Caleb emitted a dry, mirthless chuckle. My life ain't worth dirt. Besides, nobody cares about Caleb. Never has, never will. Rose advanced, her eyes blazing. That's untrue. Caleb, my father held you in esteem. He always maintained you were a decent man, underneath it all. A fleeting emotion, perhaps regret, flickered across Caleb's face, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. Your father's deceased, Rose. And he perished a fool. Rose recoiled as if struck. Matt placed a steadying hand on her arm, a silent offering of support. He perceived the anguish in her eyes, the echo of a past he couldn't fathom. Look, Caleb, said, his voice even and measured. We're not asking you to be a hero, just to recount the truth, recount what you witnessed. Caleb stared earthward, his silence stretching into an agonizing eternity. Finally, he lifted his gaze, his eyes gleaming with a mercenary light. Truth ain't free, son. It commands a price. Matt exchanged a look with Rose, bracing himself. What price? $1,000, Caleb stated, his voice flat and unwavering. Rose gasped, audibly. $1,000? Caleb, that's extortion. We don't possess that kind of sum. Then I reckon your friend is out of luck, Caleb shrugged. Like I said, I don't get entangled in Blackwood affairs. Not without recompense. A wave of resentment washed over Matt. The old codger was a carrion bird, feeding on their plight. But he knew they were cornered. We'll acquire the money, he vowed, his voice hard. But we require your solemn word that you'll testify. My word is as good as gold. Caleb simpered, a sly smirk twisting his lips. Once that gold is in my possession. Rose glared daggers at Caleb, her fists balled at her sides. You're a contemptible man, Caleb, exploiting someone's misfortune in this way. Contemptible or not, I'm the sole chance your friends got, Caleb retorted, unmoved by her ire. Ponder that, Rose. Ponder it deeply. He began to close the door once more. Rose seized the door, preventing it from closing completely. We'll get you the money, Caleb, but I swear to you, if you betray us, if you abscond with our money, I will hunt you down myself. Her voice was a hushed threat, a promise carried on the breeze. Caleb met her unwavering gaze, his own eyes reflecting a curious blend of amusement and disquiet. I wouldn't cross you, Rose. Not at all. He slammed the door shut, leaving them standing in the hushed clearing, the weight of their predicament heavier than before. As they retraced their steps to their horses, Matt could sense the palpable tension emanating from Rose. I apologize, he said, his voice laced with remorse. I underestimated the challenge. Rose halted, pivoting to face him. It's not your fault, Matt. Caleb's always been this way, self-centered, avaricious, and unreliable. But he represents our only avenue. We must discover a way to procure that money. $1,000 is a king's ransom, Rose. Where will we find such a sum? Rose's eyes hardened with resolve. I don't yet know, But we will unearth a way. We have no choice. Your life hangs in the balance. She mounted her horse, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Let us depart. We have to part. Much to accomplish. And as they rode away from the prospector's hovel, Matt recognized that their ordeal was far from concluded. The toll for justice had been named, and it far exceeded anything he had imagined. A treasured sacrifice, the weight of the timepiece in Rose's palm felt disproportionate to its size, a gravity born not of gold and gears, but of memory. More than a mere object. It pulsed with the spectral essence of her father, a muted echo in the farmhouse he'd recently vacated for good. Her thumb traced the case's smooth curves, each imperfection a landmark in the cartography of her recollections, the countless times he'd consulted it, a ritual as ingrained as sunrise. Every subtle click and whir spoke of his meticulous nature, his unwavering devotion to soil and kin. Now, that heritage was on the verge of being bartered for an insolvent man's freedom. Matt, seated across the worn kitchen table, observed her, his face a canvas of hope wrestling with shame. He understood the watch's significance. A casual mention one evening had painted a picture of her father, using it to orchestrate the farm's activities with exacting precision. He hadn't pressed for it, yet both knew Caleb's exorbitant price demanded a steep offering. "Are you certain, Rose?" he murmured, his voice roughened with worry. The hearth's soft roar amplified his question's significance. Meeting his gaze, she saw the dance of firelight mirrored in her own. "It's only a thing," she stated, the words hollow even to her. It was a tether to a past she desperately sought to retain. "But you're not just a thing, either. You deserve a chance." He pushed away from the table and crossed to her, stopping a respectful distance away. "If there were another path, believe me, I wouldn't ask this. I promise, somehow, I'll make this right." Rose lowered her gaze to the watch, clicking open the cover to reveal the pristine dial, and slender hands arrested at 3:15, the hour her father breathed his last. A painful knot closed her throat. This was not simply a transaction, it was a severance. "Just clear your name, Matt. That's recompense enough." The journey to Caleb's dilapidated cabin proceeded in tense silence. The landscape mirrored Rose's somber spirit, the vibrant foliage cloaked in the funereal hues of a leaden sky. Each rutted bump sent a shiver through her, a physical manifestation of her inner turmoil. Caleb greeted them with a gnarled smile, his eyes glittering with undisguised acquisitiveness. He offered no amenities, barely acknowledging Rose beyond a fleeting glance. His focus was entirely fixed on the currency of their visit. Offering the watch, her hand betrayed a slight tremor. "It's a gold hunter case. Keeps perfect time," she managed, her voice a thread. Caleb snatched it with surprising agility. His eyes, magnified by thick lenses, scrutinized the piece. He wound the stem, listening to its delicate pulse with palpable satisfaction. "The agreed-upon exchange," he rasped, retreating into the cabin's dim recesses. Returning quickly, he thrust a piece of paper toward Matt. "My statement, a record of what I witnessed that night. Sufficient, I trust, to exonerate you." Matt devoured the text, his eyes flickering across the page. He looked up at Caleb, a spark of obligation flickering within him. "Thank you." Caleb dismissed the gratitude with a shrug, his attention already returned to the watch. "Don't thank me. Thank the pretty little timepiece." Returning, Rose registered a profound sensation of absence. The watch was irrevocably lost, a fragment of her heritage sacrificed for a chance at Matt's future. She found herself questioning the wisdom of her choice, wondering if she had somehow desecrated her father's memory. Matt spanned the gap between them, enclosing her hand within his. His touch conveyed both heat and reassurance. "I've read it, Rose. His accountant indicts Blackwood. This will set me free." She studied his face, seeking something beyond mere gratitude. What she found quickened her pulse. "I hope so, Matt. I truly hope so." The return to the farm differed vastly. The clouds had yielded, allowing a shard of sunlight to illuminate the countryside. Rose experienced a resurgence of purpose, a sense that had lain dormant for too long. She'd made a significant concession, but in doing so, she had unearthed something far more precious, a cause to champion, a belief to embrace. That evening, after sharing a meager meal of stew and bread, Matt settled beside her on the porch. The sky blazed with a million pinpricks of light scattered on black velvet. The night air carried the fragrance of pine and damp earth. "I can't express my gratitude, Rose," he murmured. "You risked everything." Rose leaned back, gazing upward. "I didn't do it for you, Matt," she said, surprising herself with the honesty. "I did it for myself. I needed to act, to feel something other than numb. You merely provided the catalyst." Matt turned, his eyes brimming with understanding. Gently, he swept a stray tendril of hair from her face. "You possess more vitality than anyone I've ever known, Rose Fletcher. You simply needed the spark to ignite it." Their gazes locked, and for an instant, the world seemed to recede. The stars burned with greater intensity, the air thrummed with unspoken electricity, and Rose felt drawn to Matt, a connection that transcended indebtedness. It was deeper, more profound. It was the genesis of something new. "What now, Matt?" she whispered. "Now," he responded, his voice equally muted. "We fight. We take Caleb's word and expose Blackwood's true nature. We seek justice, Rose. For me, for your father, for all he has harmed." Rose nodded. Her hose nodded, resolve hardening. The pocket watch was a memory, yet its sacrifice had cleared a path towards something far greater. A chance at reparation. A quest for retribution. And, perhaps, the dawning of love. Mine of secrets, the floorboards beneath Rose's farmhouse thrummed with approaching hooves. Matt strained, ear pressed against the wall, each impact a hammer blow against their dwindling hope. "Thompson," he breathed, pulling back. "A whole damn pack of them. More than before." Rose, face a flinty mask, was already in motion, snatching her rifle from its perch above the mantelpiece. The back way. Open ground is suicide. They slipped out the rear entrance, the chill air a welcome slap after the room's suffocating dread. The approaching riders were still a distant tremor, but the air crackled with peril. Rose spearheaded their retreat into the dense thicket bordering her land, her movements fluid and knowing. Matt, his urban frame protesting, struggled to keep up, lungs burning. "Where are we headed?" he gasped, air sawing in his throat. "Old mine," she clipped, never faltering. "Shaft's been abandoned for years. A place folk avoid." The mine's mouth was a jagged wound in the hillside, overgrown and cloaked in the shadows of ancient pines. The air hung thick with the musty breath of earth and decay. Rose produced a lantern from her satchel. Its beam sliced a fragile path through the gloom. "Stay close," she warned, as they stepped across the threshold. The darkness engulfed them. Water trickled from the low ceiling, each drop echoing in the oppressive silence like a ghostly metronome. The air turned frigid, a clammy hand on their skin. A primal fear coiled in Matt's gut, the dread of entombment. "How much further?" he managed, his voice a strained whisper. "Just a bit," Rose reassured, her tone a steadying hand. "There's a side passage. Less likely they'll find us tucked away in there." They picked their way through the treacherous tunnel, the lantern light catching on the glittering pyrite embedded in the rock. Matt stumbled, his hand finding purchase against the rough, cold wall. He felt the weight of Rose's watchful gaze, a silent assessment. The side passage was a claustrophobe's nightmare, forcing them into single file. The air grew heavy, pungent with the stench of mold and forgotten things. At last, Rose halted, her hand raised. "This is it," she announced, her voice bouncing strangely off the cramped walls. "Dead end." She set the lantern down, bathing a small chamber in its meager glow, barely enough space to stand. Matt sagged against the damp rock face, his body an ache of exhaustion and raw nerve. "We can't stay here forever," he said, despair coloring his tone. Rose didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the far wall, her expression an enigma. She reached out, her fingers tracing the outline of a loose stone. "Now that's peculiar," she murmured, and then threw her weight against it. With a grinding protest, the rock shifted, revealing a hidden alcove. Rose reached inside, hauling out a weighty burlap sack. She hefted it, testing its density. "What is it?" Matt asked, curiosity piqued and vying with his fear. She opened the sack, and the lantern light exploded across its contents. Gold, coins, nuggets, a shimmering bounty concealed in the earth's embrace. Matt stared, speechless, his mind struggling to process the sight. "Where did this come from?" he finally stammered. Rose shook her head, her eyes wide with bewilderment. "I haven't a clue. My father never breathed a word of it. He worked this mine in his youth, before the farm." Matt reached out, letting the gold sift through his fingers. It was real, tangible, a buried fortune, a potential escape, a chance at renewal. But at what price? "Someone must have cached it," he said, his thoughts racing. "Maybe they never made it back. Or maybe they were silenced," Rose countered, her voice laced with caution. "This complicates matters, Matt." The murmur of voices, growing louder, snaked from the main tunnel. Thompson and his hounds were closing in. "We haven't time for this now," Matt urged, his voice sharp. "We need to stash this and move. Now." He began to shove the gold back into its hiding place, but Rose stopped him, her hand firm on his arm. "Wait," she said, her gaze burning into him. "This could be our chance, Matt, to clear your name, to rebuild our lives. We could use this gold to fight Blackwood, expose him for what he is." Matt hesitated, caught between the lure of freedom and the weight of his moral compass. The gold was an intoxicating temptation, whispering promises of salvation. But it also represented a treacherous path, a compromise of his principles. "And if it's ill-gotten?" he asked, his voice strained. "How are we any different from Blackwood if we take it?" Rose met his gaze, her eyes blazing with fierce resolve. "Sometimes the law falls short of justice, Matt. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to set things right." The voices were closing in, a cacophony of menace. Thompson's booming voice echoed through the tunnel. "Calder, Fletcher, come out now. We know you're in there." Rose grabbed a handful of gold nuggets, stuffing them into her pockets. "We decide later," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Right now, we run." She snuffed the lantern, plunging them into absolute blackness. They moved blindly through the tunnel, the posse's approach growing ever more deafening. The gold weighed heavily in Rose's pocket, a burden and a beacon, a symbol of the agonizing choices ahead. The mine, once a sanctuary, had become a repository of secrets, a place where the lines between virtue and vice blurred in the impenetrable darkness. Their flight goes on, irreversibly tainted by this discovery. Justice or escape dust motes pirouetted in the lone sunbeam that knifed through the mine's oppressive gloom, illuminating a king's ransom in unprocessed gold. Enough to vanish, reinvent themselves. Rose watched Matt, his jaw was set, that familiar mule-headed stubbornness she knew so well. She anticipated his refusal, yet needed to hear it voiced. "We could take it," she ventured, her words echoing in the vast space. "Vanish. New identities. They'd never find us." Matt pivoted, the gold reflecting in his eyes, but not his avarice. Something closer to revulsion. "Run? Flee?" He practically spat. "After everything? Let Blackwood walk? Let them pin this on me, destroy my life, while they feast on stolen wealth and innocent blood?" Rose hugged herself, the mine's chill penetrating her to the core. "What alternative do we have? Thompson's on our trail, relentless. He'll hunt us down, Matt, he always does." "Then we stand our ground," Matt declared, his gaze unwavering. He closed the distance between them, determination blazing in his eyes, brighter than any nugget. "We use this tainted fortune to expose their corruption, to unveil the Blackwood's true colors for all to see." Rose snorted, a brittle, mirthless sound. "And just how do you envision that? Playing out? Riding into town, sacks of gold in hand, announcing our intent to dismantle the Blackwood Empire? We'd be buried before we reached the livery." Matt dropped to one knee, picking up a glittering shard, turning it over in his fingers. "Not in such a clumsy fashion. We leverage it for information. Enlist those who felt the sting of Blackwood's treachery, those silenced by fear, but willing to whisper if given the means." Skepticism lingered, yet a spark ignited within Rose admiration, perhaps. His concern extended beyond personal vengeance. He considered all those Blackwood had injured, or might yet injure. "That's a perilous proposition, Matt." "Lethally so. And it could get us both killed." He rose, needing her gaze. "It's a risk worth embracing, Rose. I refuse to spend my days as a fugitive, forever glancing over my shoulder, knowing they're out there, escaping justice. I need to clear my name. I need to prove my own worth." Rose averted her gaze, gnawing on her lip. She had foreseen this, had recognized the inner inferno, the unwavering conviction that had captivated her, despite her reservations. "And if we fail?" Matt stepped closer, his tone softening. "Then we fail, striving for something worthwhile. Something greater than our individual survival. I'd sooner embrace death standing for principles than exist on my knees, haunted by inaction." Silence descended, punctuated only by the rhythmic drip of water from the mine's depths. Rose scrutinized his face, searching for deceit, a hint of ego. Instead, she found only honesty, a profound commitment to justice that resonated within her own dormant soul. "You're a damn fool, Matt Calder," she murmured, without malice. Only a grudging respect. A genuine smile bloomed, radiating from his eyes. "Perhaps. But I'm your fool now, Rose Fletcher, and I require your assistance." Rose exhaled, the fight ebbing away. She couldn't refuse him. Not now, not after all they'd weathered. "Fine," she conceded, with a sigh. "We'll proceed as you suggest, but cautiously. No grand gestures. We remain unseen and trust no one. Matt nodded, his grip tightening on the nugget. Agreed. But first, he said, a mischievous glint in his eyes, we must vacate this mine. Thompson is nothing if not persistent. A flicker of hope stood within Rose. A dangerous, reckless hope, yet hope nonetheless. And for the first time in memory, she felt a stirring of life. I have a notion, she said, a slow smile creeping across her features. It involves a distraction, a generous application of dynamite, and a profoundly disgruntled colony of bats. Matt arched an eyebrow, a playful grin dancing on his lips. Sounds remarkably like my kind of plan. He paused, his expression turning serious. Rose, I realize this is an immense burden. I'd harbor no ill will should you choose to withdraw. Rose shook her head, their eyes locking. I'm committed, Matt, to the bitter end. He reached for her hand, his touch strong, weathered, yet unexpectedly tender. Thank you, he breathed. Rose squeezed his hand, her pulse quickening. Don't express gratitude prematurely, she said. The journey ahead is arduous. As they turned toward the mine's inky maw, Rose knew she spoke truth. The path would be long, treacherous, and fraught with peril. But for the first time in ages, she felt emboldened because she wasn't alone, and because she finally held something worth championing, someone worth believing in. They were about to wager their lives on the possibility of justice, and whether they prevailed or perished, they would face it together. Showdown in the dust devils pirouetted in the scorching noon light, a spectral ballet across Redemption Gulch's main thoroughfare. In the obscure recess of the assay office's doorway, Matt tugged his hat brim lower, a shield against the glare and prying eyes. Rose preached patience, a virtue he found increasingly elusive. He needed Jedediah Stone, Blackwood's enforcer, exposed and vulnerable, and the clock was ticking. He'll come, Rose had assured him that morning, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her coffee-pouring hand. Stone has his rounds. Bank, saloon, mercantile. Thinks he owns the place. Matt trusted her intimate knowledge of this viper's pit, clinging to the hope his risky gambit would deliver. He'd dispatched Allure a discreet note, carried by a skittish stable hand, whispering of gold available, a bargain too good to refuse. The trap was baited. Now came the agonizing wait. A subtle shift in the streetscape snagged his attention. Jedediah Stone, a man carved from granite, emerged from the bank. His gaze, sharp and predatory, swept the street, flanked by two shadows sporting identical grim visages and the unmistakable outlines of concealed revolvers. Instinctively, Matt's fingers grazed the comforting steel of his Colt Peacemaker. Stick to the plan, he murmured, echoing Rose's counsel. Only fire if you must. Stone halted before the saloon, expectorating a stream of tobacco juice into the parched earth before barking an order. One henchman vanished inside, the other remained, a silent, watchful gargoyle. This was it. Matt shed the doorway's embrace, momentarily stunned by the sun's intensity. He intercepted Stone, forcing the foreman to an abrupt stop. Looking for someone, Stone? The query, though quiet, resonated in the still air. Recognition sparked in Stone's narrow eyes. A slow, cruel smile twisted his lips. Calder, heard you were sniffing around. Seems you got a hankering for dying. Maybe I possess something you crave, Matt countered, his stare unwavering. Something of value. A dry, guttural chuckle escaped Stone. You think I give a damn about what you have? You're a dead man walking, Calder. Thompson's been itching to hang you high, and I intend to collect. The reward's a pittance compared to my offer, Matt said, lowering his voice still further. Gold, Stone, more than you can imagine. Enough to buy yourself a kingdom. Greed flickered in Stone's gaze, eclipsing his suspicion. Gold, eh? Where's this pot of shine? Somewhere with privacy, Matt suggested, gesturing toward the shadowed alley flanking the saloon. Far from prying eyes. Stone hesitated, glancing at his remaining guard, who offered a nearly imperceptible nod. Temptation overwhelmed caution. All right, Calder, Stone rasped, his tone hardening. Lead on, but try anything fancy, and you'll be pushing up daisies. Matt pivoted and strode into the alleyway, Stone and his silent watchdog dogging his heels. The alley was a claustrophobic corridor, rank with the reek of stale beer and slow decay. Halting in the center, Matt turned to face Stone. Well? Stone demanded, his hand hovering over his sidearm. Where's the damned gold? It's not here, Matt stated, his voice steady. It's leverage to uncover the truth about the Blackwoods. Stone's face contorted in fury. You lowlife, think you can con me? He surged forward, clawing for his weapon. Reacting instantly, Matt danced aside, delivering a sharp, bone-jarring punch to Stone's jaw. The foreman stumbled, momentarily dazed. The henchman clawed at his revolver, but Matt was quicker. He unleashed a shot, the bullet burying itself in the henchman's shoulder. The man howled, his gun clattering to the ground. Stone recovered, his eyes blazing with incandescent rage. He charged, a wounded bull seeking vengeance. Matt knew he couldn't win a stand-up brawl. Stone was a force of nature. He needed to exploit his wits. Evading another blow, Matt used Stone's own momentum against him, slamming him against the brick wall. Stone roared in frustration, pulverizing the brick with his fist. Matt seized his chance. He grappled Stone's gun hand, wrenching it upward, disarming him with brutal efficiency. It's over, Stone, Matt declared, pressing the cold steel of Stone's own revolver against his temple. Tell me about the Blackwoods, the land grab, the murders, everything. Stone's face was a canvas of pure animosity, but he remained mute. A sudden uproar erupted from the main street, a cacophony of shouts, the thunder of approaching hooves, and the unmistakable crackle of gunfire. What in hell is that? Stone snarled, his attention momentarily diverted. Matt flicked his gaze toward the street. A swirling vortex of dust billowed above the rooftops, underscored by the frenzied cries of men. Sheriff Thompson was in town, pulled away from the alley by some unseen force. Something or someone. Understanding flooded his mind. Rose. She was staging a diversion. Lowering the gun incrementally, his focus fractured. He needed information from Stone, but he couldn't jeopardize Rose's safety. This isn't finished, Matt hissed, urgency tightening his voice. We'll settle this later. Shoving Stone aside, he snatched the fallen henchman's gun and bolted toward the alley's rear, disappearing into the labyrinthine network of buildings and backways. On Main Street, pandemonium reigned. Rose, perched atop a purloined Blackwood ranch horse, blazed through the town, discharging her rifle into the sky. The shots were for show, not for blood. Trailing behind her, Sheriff Thompson and his posse pursued relentlessly, their faces etched with grim determination. Her timing was impeccable. She'd played on Thompson's eagerness to capture Matt, turning it against him. She'd unleashed a stampede of cattle from the Blackwood pens, then ignited a haystack adjacent to the livery. The ensuing chaos, a maelstrom of panicked livestock and roaring flames, proved too alluring for even the most single-minded lawman to ignore. Casting a fleeting glance over her shoulder, she saw Thompson gaining ground. She spurred the horse onward, forging a path toward the open plains, away from Redemption Gulch, away from Matt, toward a future clouded with uncertainty. She knew she was courting danger, but she also knew Matt needed time. Time to clear his name. Time to expose the Blackwoods malfeasance. And time to finally secure justice. And she would surrender everything, if necessary, to grant him that precious time. Truth and freedom. A frigid gust clawed at Matt's skin as he slipped through the inky labyrinth behind Blackwood's mill. Rose's audacious play had gifted him time, yet the clock was ticking relentlessly. He needed undeniable evidence, and fast. He spied Foreman Harris, a stocky silhouette against the meager light spilling from his office. Harris held the linchpin, the knowledge of Jedediah Stone's orchestration of the stagecoach heist and the subsequent bloodshed. Driven by desperation, Matt became a wraith, peeling away from the denser shadows. He seized Harris, a gloved hand silencing the foreman's yelp. "Quiet, Harris," he rasped, voice a low growl. "I'm on to Stone and the stagecoach. Tell me what I need to know, and you walk. Lie, and you will regret it." Harris thrashed, meaty arms flailing, but Matt's grip held firm. He dragged the struggling man deeper into the towering stacks of lumber, the sharp, clean scent of pine filling the air. Finally, he slammed Harris against the rough timber, the wood grating against his back. "I know nothin'," Harris choked out, fear widening his eyes. "Stone's got reach. Enough to let an innocent man dangle?" Matt retorted, his voice edged with honed steel. "You were there, Harris. You witnessed it. Stone called the shots. He framed me. The truth, now, or so help me, I'll see you sharing the gallows." Matt's gaze bored into Harris, and the foreman glimpsed the implacable resolve burning within. The blood seemed to drain from his face, leaving him pasty. He swallowed, his Adam's apple jumping nervously. "All right," Harris breathed, barely audible. "All right, I'll spill. Stone conceived it all. He was strapped for cash. And that stage was hauling gold. He contracted a pair of guns for hire, told him to eliminate witnesses. I tried to dissuade him, but he wouldn't budge. Claimed it was the only recourse. And the murder?" Mac pressed, his grip tightening. "Stone himself put a bullet in the driver," Harris confessed, his voice cracking. "Then he pinned the murder weapon on you. Said you were the perfect fall guy, a nobody drifter nobody'd mess." A surge of white-hot rage coursed through Matt. He fought the urge to pummel Harris, knowing he required control. He possessed the confession, now he had to deliver it to the authorities. "Write it down," Matt commanded, pressing a scrap of paper and a worn pencil into Harris's trembling hands. "Everything you just told me, every last detail," Harris scribbled frantically, his hand spasming as he committed the damning words to paper. He surrendered the sheet to Matt, his eyes reflecting a cocktail of dread and liberation. "What now?" Harris croaked, a mere exhalation. "Now," Matt stated, a grim satisfaction hardening his features, "you're going to recount this to Sheriff Thompson." Back in town, the tempest Rose had unleashed was slowly dissipating. The overturned wagons were uprighted, the scattered livestock corralled, and the townsfolk, still buzzing with bewilderment and excitement, began to drift back to their lives. Sheriff Thompson, his face a mask of choleric frustration, barked orders, attempting to regain control. His gaze swept the edges of the milling crowd, searching for Rose. Suddenly, Matt materialized, carving a path through the throng, Harris trailing in his wake. He halted before Thompson, his eyes blazing with righteous fire. "Sheriff," Matt announced, his voice slicing through the hubbub. "I have information you need to hear." Thompson scowled at Matt, his hand instinctively drifting towards his sidearm. "Calder, you're under arrest. Don't force my hand." "This transcends your petty vendetta," Matt countered, brandishing the confession. "I possess proof of my innocence. Harris here has confessed to the truth regarding the stagecoach robbery and the driver's demise." Thompson's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "Don't insult me, Calder. This is merely another ploy." "Read it, Sheriff," Matt urged, shoving the paper into Thompson's grasp. "Read it, then ask Harris if he stands by his statement." With evident reluctance, Thompson unfolded the paper and scanned the hurried script. His expression darkened with each passing word. He leveled a suspicious glare at Harris. "Is this the truth, Harris?" Thompson demanded, his voice a low rumble. Harris, his face ashen and gaunt, offered a slow nod. "Every word, Sheriff. Stone masterminded the entire affair. He set up Calder." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd as comprehension dawned. They had been swift to condemn Matt, eager to believe the accusations. Now, the evidence stared them down. Thompson, though surrounded by corruption, felt the burden of his oath. He couldn't disregard the confession, not with so many witnesses. He holstered his weapon and addressed his deputies. "Arrest Jedediah Stone," he commanded, his voice resolute. "And round up those hired guns. We're getting to the bottom of this." The deputies moved with dispatch, disappearing into the crowd. Within moments, Stone was hauled into the square, his face twisted with fury and disbelief. The gunslingers soon followed, their swagger evaporating under the weight of the charges. As Stone and his cohorts were escorted away, a wave of relief washed over Matt. He was vindicated. The truth had surfaced. He surveyed the faces in the crowd, witnessing a mixture of shame, remorse, and gratitude. He had been judged and damned by these individuals, yet now they were beginning to perceive him differently. His eyes searched for Rose, but she had vanished. She had melted back into the pandemonium she had unleashed, leaving him to grapple with the aftermath. He knew she remained in peril, a target of Blackwood's vengeance. He had cleared his name, but their battle was far from won. He had to locate her, safeguard her, ensure her well-being. Sheriff Thompson, too, was actively seeking Rose, as the charges from the initial diversion could still stand, regardless of Matt's exoneration. Matt knew where he needed to be, back at the farm, back with the woman who had risked everything to aid him. He had unearthed the truth, but now he had to fight for freedom, for both of them. He began to shoulder his way through the dispersing crowd, a renewed sense of purpose propelling him forward, leaving behind a town finally finding peace and heading towards a threat that was far from neutralized. Home at last, the morning air, sharp and invigorating, carried the scent of dewy soil and nascent possibilities. Matt gathered his meager effects, the coarse weave of the borrowed shirt a stark contrast against his weathered palms. His gaze swept across Rose's snug dwelling, a tumult of emotions churning within him, thankfulness, a hard-won tranquility, and an acute awareness of his own shortcomings. He was exonerated, Stone's deceit laid bare. Celebrations were in order, a swift departure to forge a new identity, far from the shadows of his past. Yet, the prospect of parting with Rose felt akin to self-amputation. He discovered her outside, nurturing her small garden with practiced grace. Dawn gilded the escaping tendrils of her auburn hair, igniting them like embers. He lingered, the familiar tenderness swelling in his chest. He was unworthy of her devotion. He'd delivered nothing but disruption to her haven, forcing her into perils she shouldn't have imagined. He broke the silence. "Rose?" She straightened, wiping her hands clean on her apron. The gray depths of her eyes locked with his, reflecting a hesitant expectation he struggled to interpret. "I'm leaving today," he stated, the words abrupt even to himself. Disappointment, fleeting as a shadow, flickered across her face before she composed herself. "I assumed as much, with everything resolved." "Right," he mumbled, nudging a pebble with his boot. "All settled, except for the tempest raging within." "Where will you head?" she inquired, her tone carefully even. He shrugged, non-committal. "West, maybe. Find work. Turn over a new leaf." The words rang false, a hollow echo. He pictured her here, amidst her thriving vegetables, as the seasons turned, her life progressing independently of his. The vision stung. She held his gaze for a long moment, her perception unnervingly sharp. "You don't sound thrilled by the prospect." He met her eyes directly. "It's what I must do," he asserted, striving for conviction. "I can't remain here, Rose, not after all that's happened." "After all that?" she countered, a glint of steel in her voice. "After everything we've been through, you think you owe me an apology and a hasty exit. Is that all this has amounted to?" He recoiled. "No, that's not what I meant at all. It's just I'm not right for you, Rose. You deserve someone untainted, someone without my history." She advanced, her eyes ablaze. "Don't presume to dictate what I merit, Matt Calder. Don't you dare imagine you know my feelings." He fell silent, taken aback by her intensity. He'd never witnessed such raw emotion from her. "Do you think I'm blind to your character?" she pressed, her voice wavering slightly. "Do you think I haven't seen the honorable man you fight so hard to conceal? You risked everything to shield me, to clear your name. You confronted Jedediah Stone and his corrupt regime, and now you're simply abandoning everything because you believe you're undeserving?" He attempted a rebuttal, but she silenced him. "I believed I was content here, solitary," she confessed, her voice softening, the anger waning, replaced by a vulnerability that tugged at his soul. "I thought I was fulfilled with my quiet existence, my garden, my routine. But then you arrived and upended everything. You demonstrated that there was more to life than mere survival. You showed me what it meant to laugh once more, to truly feel, to care again." She drew a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. "And yes, it was frightening. Yes, it was perilous. But it was also exhilarating. It was authentic. And I wouldn't relinquish it for anything." He stared, stunned. He recognized the truth in her expression, the depth of her sentiment, the love she offered. And suddenly, the weight of his past, the burden of his transgressions, felt lighter, diminished. "Rose," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. She reached out, her hand gently cradling his cheek. "I'm not imploring you to stay out of obligation, Matt. I'm begging you to stay because I desire you here, because I'm in love with you." The words hung suspended, shimmering with sincerity and vulnerability. A lump formed in his throat, tears pricking his eyelids. He'd never heard those words spoken to him with such candor, such profoundness. He didn't merit this, but God, he craved it. He raised his hand, covering hers, his thumb tracing the delicate architecture of her wrist. "Rose," he repeated, his voice firmer now. I don't know what to say." "Promise me you'll stay," she pleaded, her eyes searching his. "Promise me you'll give us a chance." He surveyed her modest farm, the undulating hills stretching into the distance, the sun-drenched expanse above. He reflected on his past, the years spent fleeing, concealing himself, attempting to outrun his demons. And he realized he no longer needed to run. He'd been seeking a haven, a place of belonging, his entire existence. And he'd discovered it, not in some distant territory, but here, within this woman's embrace. "I'll stay," he affirmed, his voice steady, resolute. "I'll stay, Rose. I swear." A slow smile illuminated her face, transforming her features, rendering her radiant. She drew closer, enfolding him in her arms, embracing him tightly. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling the fragrance of Tao. "Wildflowers and sunshine. Thank you," she murmured, her voice muffled against his chest. "Thank you for choosing me." He held her close, his heart brimming with a love he hadn't known he possessed. He'd been so consumed with fleeing his history that he'd nearly overlooked the future beckoning to him. A future with Rose, a future imbued with hope, with affection, with the promise of renewal. He lifted her chin, his gaze meeting hers. "I'm not simply selecting you, Rose," he said softly. "I'm choosing us. I'm choosing a life with you. And I vow I'll dedicate every day to becoming the man you deserve." He lowered his head, his lips finding hers in a tender, lingering caress. It was a kiss that whispered of absolution, of acceptance, of a love forged in the crucible of hardship. It was a kiss that sealed their destiny, intertwining them in a bond impervious to disruption. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Rose framed his face with her hands. "We have a considerable amount of work ahead of us," she declared, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "This farm won't manage itself." He grinned. "I'm not deterred by a little labor," he responded, "especially if I have the privilege of sharing it with you." They strolled back toward the dwelling, hand in hand, their steps light and effortless. The future remained uncertain, but for the first time in ages, Matt experienced a profound sense of tranquility, a sense of rootedness. He was home. He was finally home. And he knew, with unwavering conviction, that he occupied his rightful place. They would construct a life together, piece by piece, season after season. They would confront whatever trials lay ahead, together. Because they had each other. And that was all that mattered.